Welcome back to Beernid 40K. Orktober is in full swing and it has a lot of people dusting off their orcs and bringing them to the table. I have a friend that plays really competitive orcs and kill team and he's beaten me senseless a few times, but I've managed to win against him too. So today I thought we'd celebrate Orktober with a look at both sides of how orcs work in kill team, how to win with them and also how to play against them. So like this video, subscribe to the Hive, and let's take a look. Like many factions in Kill Team, Orcs are a faction with lots of pros and cons. The things they do really well, however. Because of this, I do consider Orcs to be a competitive faction, more so than, say, my Genestealer cults, which sit in a much lower tier. Orcs are cheap, and it costs less than a basic Space Marine to build one of their most powerful models. So yes, Orcs are fairly easy to kill, though. And they are a faction that does its best work at close range, so this does present some challenges. In the elite setting of Kill Team, there are lots of things that can snipe off important characters in the Orcs, so watch out for things like Tau and Admech that have ways of reliably hitting on twos and dealing multiple wounds that kind of take you out before you can make it into combat. So to get around this, it's usually a good idea to list tailor whether you're playing with Orcs or against Orcs. So if you're playing as Orcs against a shooty army, the best thing you can do is bring Commandos. Commandos are really good against shooting armies because they have a special rule making them -2 to hit and cover, and they have better movement, which lets them get into combat faster. So taking these is worth the extra 2 points because no matter what, Orcs have a low save that is often bypassed with AP negative weapons and things like that, and they just, once you take a wound, it's very hard to save it with only a 6-up at best. So the moral of the story is that with Orcs, it's better for you not to get shot at all, rather than needing to save wounds later. Now this doesn't mean that Orc Boys don't have their place. Spamming a ton of basic Orc Boys is absolutely rough to face if you're playing as a close combat army, utilizing a small or elite kill team against Orcs. So for example, I have a list developed for competitions with the Tyranids that almost won first place in a recent competition. Yet that same list of 5 big bugs just got overwhelmed by the Orcs. It doesn't matter how scary your big bugs are if you start getting locked down by multiple Orc Boys, because even if you survive, more just keep charging in, and pretty soon you aren't able to run for objectives because you're literally being mobbed down by the green tide. So to put this more simply, if you're playing as Orcs, use the roster aspect of Kill Team to full effect. To do this, you want to spam Commandos against shooting armies so you can survive to lock them up in close combat. But if you're fighting other close combat armies, you want to go the cheaper route and just bring normal boys. Now, Power Claws are absolutely disgusting in Kill Team, pretty much guaranteeing death to whatever it is they charge. And if you build your list right, you can stuff 2 of these into your kill teams. Now, one is going to be on a regular boss knob, and the other is going to be on a commando boss knob. Now, I know it's almost an automatic thought to put one of these boss knobs into your leader position, but in competitive games, it's actually going to be better to buff these even further by making them specialists. So, one of the best options for the leader, in my opinion, for the Orcs is actually the lowly Gretchen. I know it's not the fluffiest thing, but their small size makes them very easy to hide in the backfield, and that green tide that's pressing continuously forward means most armies will not be sneaking somebody through to get them. So Grots can also act as mobile cover, granting -1 to hit your big guys, and for only 3 points, they are great for helping you win games with objectives. So in my opinion, every Orc team should have a couple of Grots around somewhere, even if you don't make them your leader. So let's pretend that you do make a Grot your leader in competitive games, and you take the 2 knob bosses, you give them Power Claws or Big Choppas. Well, what specialism should you give your knobs with the Power Claws and Big Choppas? Well, that's simple. A veteran specialist that is an Orc knob with a Power Claw, especially the Commando knob, is by far the nastiest build they can make. I recently played as the Defender against Orcs in the Assassinate mission, and my opponent had his veteran in close combat wrecking face from turn 1. And since he charged in, he was the one that got to swing first, and I was just so busy trying to keep my leader alive that there was no winning the game. It just became an overwhelming press of green bodies. So that pre-game movement makes the Commando Boss Knob Veteran just the grossest thing alive if you consider that you can stack the Veteran move with take forward positions in the scouting phase, and they reroll charges with the Here We Go special rule. So in total, that is 6 inches for the Commando Knob in the scouting phase, up to 12 inches of additional movement if you advance for 1 CP thanks to the Veteran Specialist move ability, and then a re-rolling charge up to 12 inches from there. So you have a Power Claw with a 30-inch move before the end of the first turn with a Commando boss knob. And even if he doesn't make combat for some reason, if he ends his move in cover, the Commando ability makes him -2 to hit. So simply put, he's a very strong build. If you play Orcs, I would say you do not want to leave him out of your lists. Now, the best specialism for the regular boss knob is definitely going to be Combat Specialist. He might not be as fast as that Commando veteran, but with 4 attacks because of that Combat Specialism, he is a monster, swinging that Power Claw at Strength 8, AP -3, doing D3 damage each, and he's got 4 attacks to do that with. Tyranid warriors will melt, and even lictors are going to cry against this guy. I've seen it myself, so he's definitely something to consider. Now, before we go on, I know we're talking a lot about combat builds. That is probably the best way to build Orcs. However, as much as people might disagree, I do think Orcs can run shooty lists as long as you list tailor. But that is the key to remember. Each faction will require a different approach. So you're going to bring things like rocket launchers against Space Marine equivalents, and you're going to bring things like big shootas and scorches versus low toughness factions, or things like Harlequins that have an invuln. So if you remember to take AP negative against Space Marines, and buckets of dice versus spam or close combat armies, you can do shooty Orcs, I think, even if it isn't as competitive as melee Orcs according to many players. So let's imagine you're playing in a meta that has an Orc player, but you don't play Orcs. How do you beat them if you find yourself fighting Orcs on a regular basis? Well, thing number one that Orcs don't like are flamers. The big blobs that move across the board make those auto-hitting flamers do maximum damage since you can split attacks. And since they auto-hit, if they get a wound on the Orc, that Orc chassis only has a 16% chance of surviving that wound. The other thing that Orcs don't like are things that re-roll ones to hit, like my Tyranid's Scything Talons. Yes, these lack AP, but against Orcs, they just help you get more attacks through. And that means more wounds that they have to try to save. And again, things that wound an Orc are only getting prevented on a 6 at best, so you want to force them to roll those t-shirt saves as much as possible. So make use of the roster in campaigns and when you're playing your games, and when you come across Orcs, really try to think in terms of weapons that put out volume of dice rather than quality dice. Otherwise, you're going to end up pulling your models off the table faster than the Orcs do, and if that happens, Orcs win. The other thing to consider is that leadership 6 and 7 across the board with the Orcs and their high model counts means that Orcs tend to lose on morale before other melee-focused factions like Tyranids that have a lot of leadership 9 around. If you can just get enough flesh wounds and out-of-action models to start forcing morale at the end of each round, Orcs will have a harder time surviving unbroken than some other factions. So watch out for this if you're playing as Orcs too. Use things like the Veteran Orc knob to take out your high priority targets early, because each turn, the problems that certain models are going to cause you are just going to keep getting worse for you. So if you rush your boss knob in, your Veteran knob, if you manage to take out that big threat but you lose your Veteran knob, you're still going to have another killing knob on the table, and him and his mob are going to have a better overall go in the game than they would have if they were going to have to put up with flamers or other things they really don't like to face as Orcs. So, I hope that this helps you understand Orcs and Kill Team a bit more, whether you play with them or against them. Let me know if your experiences with Orcs have you thinking similar thoughts, or if perhaps you see things in a different way. I hope you're all having a great Orktober. Remember to like and subscribe. This is BeerNid40K, and I'll be back again very soon.